Hello and welcome to my presentation for today, which I've entitled Library Unions, Collective Bargaining in K-12 Academic and Public Library Settings. From my experience being a part of unions and working with unions in libraries, I found that a lot of people make a lot of assumptions or have a lot of maybe stereotypes or other misinformed ideas about what it's like to work within a union. And I just want to kind of share some research that shows that it may be different than what people expect. Okay, so just to quickly go over an outline for this presentation, we're going to start with some basic facts and statistics about unions and union participation. Then we're going to go over some pros and cons, or as I will call them, cons and pros, to being part of a union or to managing a union within a library. Then kind of go through the three basic spheres of librarianship and unions, starting with public libraries, and then school libraries, and then academic libraries. Okay, so now to quickly go over some basic stats about unions, many of which you may have seen in our textbook. About 10% of American workers are currently unionized. Those numbers have been dropping since the 70s. But the education, training, and library occupations are still the highest category of union representation. A lot of people have probably gone through most of their career without encountering a union, but it still can be something you run into, or you may find people are interested in. One of the main factors recently has been the Janus Supreme Court decision in 2018 that has led to lower union participation rates since then. And now I'd like to turn to a section called Cons and Pros. These are aspects of unionization that a lot of people may see as negatives, but I think there are some positive aspects that are being overlooked. For example, the whole process of unionization, as people say, can be a negative because it's extremely time consuming, creates more rules and paperwork. Unionizing can easily take, a year or more. But I think what's overlooked in there is you're creating procedures and rules to guide the whole library's operation, make things run more smoothly and fairly for everyone. So if you didn't already have those procedures in place, creating them can be very helpful and be a good idea. I think we've all worked in places where, you may have been told you were breaking a rule and you ask, well, wait a minute, I've never heard of this rule before. And you find out it only exists in a binder in the library director's office and no one has seen it for 10 years. Or, it's buried in a hard drive somewhere. Unionization makes sure that all of these rules get worked through, that are created in a way that's sort of acceptable to everybody and that everyone can then see and follow and understand later. So yeah, maybe a lot of work to go through, but I think it's worthwhile in the end to have a clear set of expectations for everybody. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about the actual negotiation process itself. If you are a staff member and you're in the process of unionizing, by the time you sit down at a negotiating table, you will have union representatives on your side. These are people who form union contracts for a living and are experienced at this and will do the bulk of the actual arguing and discussion and supporting of your side. Staff members will certainly be there to answer questions or provide clarification, but they won't necessarily be doing the presentation and the arguing. I would say it's much more like being in court where you may be there at a table, but you have an attorney or somebody representing you. It's similar on the administration side. It's not uncommon for directors or other administrators to be there, but many libraries will have, say, somebody part of a greater organization, like if you're part of a city or an HR department there to negotiate, or many libraries or other organizations actually hire labor lawyers to represent their side. So again, it's not necessarily you standing up and arguing against your boss. It's sort of professionals who know how to do this and have done this before on both sides. Another aspect of unions that can make people uncomfortable is a sort of adversarial relationship between library leaders and staff once a union contract is in place. And that doesn't really need to be the case. The only thing the contract does is it creates kind of a framework for how to bring up issues and resolve them. I think on both sides there can be issues that people are uncomfortable with or don't want to bring up. For example, let's just say there is an employee whose work is not up to standard or their behavior doesn't meet expectations. For a library leader, it can be uncomfortable to have that kind of conversation, to bring up and address those issues. So, or maybe you're just too busy to take the time to address it. It can be easy to kind of let those things slide. Or on the employee side, if there's something your supervisor or someone else is doing that is making your more difficult, it can be hard to address those issues. And so what really happens is negative behaviors can lead to lower staff morale, high turnover, and other problems that are really sort of being masked by not having a system to address them, which unions can provide. Yeah, now I'd like to address some common concerns and problems that can arise within the unionizing process, especially within public libraries. Research has shown when they've surveyed employees who are going through the unionizing process or interested in it, they are mostly concerned. The number one concern is a fear of backlash from the administration for their efforts. Unfortunately, that can be true, but I think it's important for people to know that you do have the legal right to unionize. You can distribute literature, you can talk about the union, you can ask people to sign union cards, and you cannot be disciplined or fired for unionizing while you're at work. So, as an administrator, I think it's important to know what the laws are in this and what you can say and not say to your staff who are talking about unionizing. And as an employee, I think it's important to know that you do have legal protections for trying to do those things. If unionizing is something you want to talk about and you're interested in, I can't say that you won't get a backlash, but it is something you have a legal protection in, and especially once you've started the unionizing process, there are people you can turn to when things turn negative. Just in the situations I've been through, I was present when the library president of the library board suggested that entire staff should be fired for attempting to unionize, and the library director agreed that that could be a course of action. It is not. That would not have been legal in any way, shape, or form. I have also been asked when I had a staff of 12 people to write negative reviews for four individuals in particular for not being team players and having a bad attitude, and they happen to be the four members of a union's negotiating team. Again, not legal, and I did not go through with that. So I wish I could say that, people in libraries try and unionize, that there won't be any challenges or threats or negative things like that, but it certainly can happen. But I think everyone involved should know that there are rules against those sort of things and protections for people going through the process. Okay, for this section, I want to talk about K through 12 school librarians and the teachers' unions that they are usually a part of, in terms of sort of the narratives that can be out there within the news or in making public policy, some assumptions that are made about teachers' unions that when researchers have looked into it, they're just not finding any support for. So the first one would be student achievement. There's sort of a narrative out there that schools with teachers unions, the teachers have no incentive to try very hard, so the students don't do as well. For better or worse, there has been no link established between student achievement and teachers unions. Students score just as well in standardized tests and other measures, whether their teachers are unionized or not. Um, Secondly, there's a sort of narrative out there that schools are against accountability, that they don't want to sort of hold bad teachers accountable and kind of push back against those measures. There really is no link there either. Sometimes unions are in favor of some measures or they're against other measures, but it usually comes down to local or state level issues, such as how those measures are going to be paid for, that unions are for or against. There's no clear link that says that when accountability issues pop up, that unions are generally against them. Second one, just in terms of general politics, the story out there is that unions generally are more liberal and support liberal candidates. That has also been shown not to be true. Unions generally support, whoever is in charge in their area or whoever is in office, um, and give to both parties equally. Some research has shown that they, for example, are delegates to national political conventions equally. Um, the only real link that does show up is that unions tend to be more active in blue or purple states and are not very politically active in conservative red states, just because they're not really as much a part of the public policy making process. They're kind of ignored. So a lot of the unions just don't participate. They don't put their effort into areas where they're not going to be listened to. So it's not really a liberal conservative issue. It's teachers unions um, doing what they can to make an impact where they can and not really based on political parties. Okay, so now to move on to academic libraries, one of the bigger issues in academic librarianship is if you're trying to advocate for a better salary or more benefits or that sort of thing, are you better off trying to gain faculty status and working with the rest of the university faculty to advocate for yourself that way, or would you be better off forming a union within the library? Research on this is kind of mixed. In general, I would say that most of the studies show that if you are part of a union, your salaries are higher than otherwise, but there are some studies showing that that is not true. The difficulty is that no two universities are really alike. Even within the same region, you could have, uh, PhD granting institutions versus, master's levels schools, and that can change the makeup of the library. Different parts of the country have different living standards and therefore different salaries. So it's really hard to generalize from one library to the next to kind of compare um, what your best course of action would be. Another really important issue for academic libraries is that they can often look and function quite different than other departments within the university. For example, in like an English or an education department, the lion's share of the budget for that department is just going to go towards salaries, where libraries have the extra huge expense of the collection itself. And there's no real evidence showing that unionized versus non-unionized libraries have a greater or smaller percentage of that university budget. Almost all libraries have about 2.2% of the total university spending. So if librarians are advocating for higher salaries, that money has to come from somewhere else, and that somewhere else has to be the collection. So unionized libraries, they generally have higher salaries by about 2 to 10%, but they have a correspondingly lower collection development budget, or possibly smaller staff overall in terms of student to librarian ratio. So that's something to consider if you're looking for an academic librarianship job. Unionized, non-unionized, public versus private, is that you may have a higher salary, but you may have like a higher workload or fewer resources to deal with. Whether that trade-off is worth it is up to you. So that is it for my presentation on unions within libraries. I hope you have seen that unions may not be the terrible thing they're often made out to be, but neither are they a cure-all for everything that may happen in your library. I hope either way that you've learned that there's something to look into in whatever library environment you end up in. Thank you.